children who aren't even born yet to live in a free society. They won't even be able to have children under the one-child policy if the globalists are successful. Now, Catherine Austin Fitts has an amazing bio. She has managed more than $25 billion of transactions and invested to date and has led a portfolio strategy for $300 billion of financial assets and liabilities. She was also the number 2 person at Department of Housing, Assistant Secretary of Housing, and the commissioner of the first Bush administration. And it just goes on and on and on, the things that she's done. Again, Assistant Secretary of Housing, Federal Housing Commissioner in the first Bush administration of President Hamilton Securities Group, Washington, D.C. Investment Bank, super high-powered lady in the system coming out and exposing it. And she's talked about the crimes committed by Geithner and other people. And you have Geithner at the New York Fed that runs policy for the Fed. You have Paulson at the time at Treasury, the former head of Goldman Sachs, Geithner formerly of Goldman Sachs, giving themselves 100 cents on the dollar for made-up derivatives they made that the public had no, contractual agreement to pay for to them. You have them also ordering AIG to make it secret. And now that's continued on, and that clearly, according to Judge Napolitano and many others, is a federal crime. But somebody who really understands this is Catherine Austin Fitts. So we're going to talk about Bankstergate or Bankergate. I don't want to call it just Timmy Geithnergate, Tiny Tim Gate, because he's just one of these people. It goes to Larry Summers. It goes to Robert Rubin. It goes to Ben Bernanke. It goes to everybody that got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. So joining us is a true bona fide expert in all of this, Catherine Austin Fitts. Great to have you on with us.
Alex, it's always a privilege and a pleasure.
Well, you're a busy...
You know what I would love to tell everybody about is how important this Geithner story is. It kind of seems like a big sort of inside baseball squabble, but I really want everyone to understand what's at the heart of this. Now, and I want to use a metaphor. Let's pretend you have a neighbor, and every time, whenever you and your wife go to buy a car, you have to pay 5% to get a loan, but he can get a loan for 0 or 1%. And then when you get a mortgage, you have to pay, 8 to 10%, but he can get a mortgage for 0 or 1%. And then when he starts a business, he can get special loans from the local municipality for 0%, and then you have to, use your savings or borrow your money or take another loan on your house. Well, it doesn't take long to figure that he's going to, if this keeps going on, he's going to be able to buy up everything in town, right?
Yes.
And that's what this is about. Is we've got 2 classes of players. We've got a Federal Reserve Bank that's saying we reserve the right to provide low cost, if not free, cost of capital, and even now gifts. So instead of him borrowing money at 1%, they just give him the money so he can buy all the houses up in the neighborhood. And what we're talking is a backdoor financial mechanism that allows a small group of people to basically buy up and take control of everything because they have, low cost to free money, whereas everybody else has to pay, market rate, or a much higher rate, number one. But number two, if, let's say, he gets in trouble, he gets bailed out, you get in trouble, you lose your house, you lose your car, you lose your family. And so we're talking about a society that is turning into 2 societies and 2 economies, and one is getting rigged money. And that's what this is about, because if you've got a Secretary of the Treasury who's basically trying to rig things, not for the people who are productive, not for the people who are making our economy strong, not for the people who are creating jobs, but the people who are the best dirty players, then it's, for a financial person, this can go no place good. It can never work, because instead of allocating capital based to who's productive, we're allocating capital to who's the best dirty player with the most inside pull. It's kind of devolved into the schoolyard in Lord of the Rings or something. I mean, or in Animal Farm. It's the only, this is the financial version of Animal Farm, and that's what this is about, because we've seen, since the beginning of the Republic till 2 years ago, in all the wars, Alex, in all the programs, in all the government waste, in all the government spending, we build up $12 trillion of debt. And then in a year and a half, this administration has lent or given as a gift $12 trillion to Wall Street and the financial firms. And that is, can you imagine, that is amount equivalent to all the money we've ever borrowed since the beginning of the Republic.
It's incredible.
It's a financial coup d'etat. And that's what it's about. And the power of this thing is, are we going to create a level playing field, or are we not? Because if we're going to if we've got a Secretary of the Treasury who's going to rig the game, in visible, secretive ways, and one of the magical things here is, and I got to give him a lot of credit, is Bloomberg has brought a lawsuit. They won in the first round in August for Freedom of Information Act against the Federal Reserve. Brought a lawsuit and won in the first round in August, and the Fed has now appealed. It's in the Court of Appeals, and the Fed is saying we need the ability to lend an insider group of firms $2 trillion, which is part of the $12 trillion, and not tell you who got it and on what terms. And we don't have to provide that under Freedom of Information law. It's an arrogance which takes your breath away.
And they're setting the precedent to do even more in the future. And you talk about a rigged game where they get the free money and now it's just given to them. They then use that money as weapons to buy off states, buy media, buy infrastructure, blow out third world countries, now blow out first world nations. And they have their people in both parties, as you know, in all the major regulatory positions. And I think that's why they're so arrogant now, is they're going for broke. The big question is, and I want to get into how we can push to get Geithner indicted or a special prosecutor or something like that. But the big question is, where are they headed if we don't stop them? Because they have the incentive to shut off money to Main Street so it's destitute, so they can come in and buy it up for pennies on the dollar.
Right, and that's what they're doing. I mean, the reports now, if you look at the commercial real estate market, and we haven't begun to see all the falls in the commercial real estate market, they're talking about buying things at 50% or less of, the market height. And this is what I saw as Assistant Secretary of Housing. I came in as Assistant Secretary of Housing in 1989, and at the time, FHA was the largest property owner because of our foreclosures, and then the RTC got created to handle the dispositions of the S&Ls. And we started to auction off where my secretary was on the board of the RTC, and so I was involved. And we were taking in massive amounts of property, and the fraud, Alex, was off the charts. You'd get a portfolio and says, there are 10 mortgages on this block in Detroit, and you'd go there, and there were no houses there. So the fraud was off the charts. But what happened is when the first bids came in, no one knew if the bids would work. And I looked at the first 3 bids, and I said, oh, my God, the people buying this are buying at 10 cents on the dollar what their syndicate sold 2 years ago for, 200% of market value. So it was a pump and dump, and they were going to make, they were going to triple, quadruple the money they'd made selling out at the high. So this is a scam. And I think part of what may be different this time is you now have something you didn't have in 1989. We didn't have the Internet. We didn't have, Alex Jones. We didn't have all these different ways of communicating and seeing how monstrous the game was.
And the fraud is much bigger.
Oh, the fraud is so much bigger because they played the game. The black budget game happened in the real estate market, in the mortgage market in the 80s, but it didn't happen in the securities market. And the other thing that didn't happen, Alex, was we didn't have what's called the plunge protection team, which is if you look at the market manipulation done by Treasury and the Fed as a matter of policy, we didn't have that. And so, a firm like a Goldman Sachs or the firms involved in this squabble now with Geithner, they didn't begin to have the opportunities to trade on inside information that now exist. You've read the stories of front running or naked short selling. All these things have been documented, and I think, when I live in Hickory Valley, Tennessee, and when I first moved here in 1999, saying, that's it, I want out of Washington and Wall Street, they've gone nuts. People here could not fathom the extent of the corruption, but what I see happening, which is so exciting, your story about the Obama deception is a great example, is people are beginning to realize, this thing is not an adult we're not watching a group of adults. We're watching a group of people who've been getting away with it for so long that they are